Hi there, Junior Rangers. Today we're going to do another art demonstration on an animal tracks or footprints themed project. I believe you've been learning about animal tracks this week, so hopefully you'll have some fun putting all your knowledge to practice in this artwork. I don't know too much about animal tracks myself, so I got this book that shows you what tracks animals make, and I've really enjoyed looking at all the different shapes that one sees within them. I'm getting quite excited about what we can achieve in this project, just looking at the different shapes and patterns these footprints or tracks make. I've really enjoyed finding out a little bit more about this, and I really hope you guys are going to enjoy making your own footprint themed artwork as you go along. This artwork's been inspired a little bit by Japanese Notan artworks using negative and positive space in two colors, and you'll see what I mean a little bit later as we go along. So before we get started, let's discuss what we'll need. I've got this example to show you what the artwork could possibly look like, but again, yours might look very different. You're the artist and you might take an entirely different artistic direction. So as I said earlier, this work will be inspired by a Japanese Notan technique where paper is cut out from one side in the black paper and then stuck on the opposite side of the page, mirroring what you see on both. So as this reflects what is happening on the other side, it deals a little bit with symmetry, also shape and form. So perhaps you can think a little bit about this as you creating your artwork. Think about the different patterns you could create, the different shapes and forms you could use, and where you'd like to place things on your page. So getting started, you can see I've chosen a lion footprint, or a simplification of a lion footprint, and some footprints that almost look like frog or amphibian footprints, and the ones at the bottom are modeled on an antelope footprint. So to make this project, we're going to need a pencil, a pair of scissors, although smaller ones might be more helpful if you have small hands, and some sort of glue. I've just used this regular glue stick, but if you have a different kind of glue, like a paper glue or a craft glue, you're very welcome to use that. It might just take a little bit longer to stick it. The paper I'm using is half a sheet of black A4 paper. It's just something I had at home. You can use any paper that you may find around the house, remembering that recycling paper or art materials is always a great idea. We'll be using A4 white paper as our base, and you may want to take a moment to gather all the things that you will need for this art demonstration now. I'll catch up with you in a couple of minutes. So Junior Rangers, before you start your artwork, it's always a good idea to do a bit of planning. I often say, before you start to make beautiful art, you have to think and plan. So you might want to have a scrap piece of paper on hand to draw out a design of sorts. Think about the footprints that you would like to create, and perhaps you can do a bit of a sketch on your planning piece of paper. So if this was my planning, I might think about doing that same lion footprint again, remembering that my lion footprints are very simple and abstract. They don't look like the real thing, but I'm choosing to make my forms more artistic than realistic. So maybe start with a simple shape like this. Remember when you're doing your actual artwork to keep the shapes a little bit on the larger side. If you cut out very small shapes, they become difficult to stick down and it becomes very tricky trying to leave the gaps between the different shapes. So I'm keeping my shapes quite big and focusing on the larger details. If we look at the African wildcat's footprints, you can see the African wildcat and spotted hyena have very similar shaped footprints, but there are some subtle differences in the shapes of the pads of their feet. So maybe I'll think about including one of each of these in my work. Junior Rangers, it's very important to remember that you're only going to be designing your artwork for half the page, because anything that you design or cut out from the one side will be stuck on the other side, therefore forming your whole artwork. So just remember not to plan anything that goes over your midline of this planning page. So I would look at the picture to help me, but again, your artwork is your own, so you can design your own kind of animal footprint. Just remember to keep the spacing between your shapes quite thick so that those little shapes don't become too difficult to cut out. All right, let's get started with our actual artwork and start working with the black paper. For this artwork, you can use any sort of paper, as I mentioned earlier. I had this small piece of brown paper at home, which wasn't quite large enough to use for my A4 size Notan, but I just wanted to show you what else could be available. I'm going to be using the black paper, but you can use a thick card or a thin piece of colorful paper. So when we get started, just remember that we are only going to be dealing with the one side only, which you can see here, my black piece of paper. So we'll be cutting out the shapes from this and reflecting it onto the white side. So Junior Rangers, when you're drawing, remember you have to think about only drawing half of the form. So I'm drawing half of my footprint on the black piece of paper, remembering that I will cut this out and stick it on the opposite side once it is ready. So I'm going to think about simplifying the shape and drawing quite a large area. Now I'm ready to start cutting it out. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out the shape, but I want you to think about the way you cut with your scissors. Perhaps move the paper more than your hand holding the scissors. See if that works in creating a more smooth cutting line. Junior Rangers, remember to try and cut as close to the line that you've drawn as possible. This will help you maintain the picture that you want to create in your artwork. So you can see I'm cutting around the paper shape very slowly and very carefully. So this is now the time that the artwork starts to take shape. Quite exciting to see it evolving. If your black piece of paper is going to be on the left-hand side, the part that you've cut out will be turned over and mirrored on the right-hand side. Remember when you're sticking it down to match up the edges of the shape exactly. The Japanese Notan works are very particular on this. If your edges start not matching up, it starts looking a little messy. But I'm not going to stop here. I'd like to cut out more shapes out of this paw print. It's really important when you're doing your artwork, especially outside, to weight things down so you don't lose little pieces of paper. One little hack that you have to try and do is stick the pieces of paper as they're cut out. It's so easy to lose these little pieces of paper, and once you've lost a shape, your artwork really does start to look different. So I'm just going for it. I'm not using my pencil to draw out the shape before I cut it. You are very welcome to use your pencil and cut along the lines once again. I'm just doing this to save a little bit of time. So now you can start seeing how the shapes are mirrored on each side of that midway line. Repeating patterns can make your artwork look very interesting. So just remember to stick down all those little bits as you go. You don't want to lose any of them. The little challenge in this artwork is that things do move around a bit if they're not stuck down. So if you look at my small circle that I cut out, I have to make sure that I flick that over exactly. If you turn the shapes around when you're sticking them down, your artwork starts to look a little bit dysfunctional. So just make sure that you hold it in place and really know exactly where you're going to stick it. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the correct side and make sure I glue it down, touching the edges of the other shape. Remember, it's okay if it's not totally perfect. We're only trying our best, and I'm sure whatever you create today, Junior Rangers, they'll look amazing. So you can see I'm cutting out some organic shapes. This means the shapes aren't geometric like triangles and rectangles and squares, rather more fluid and flowing, not really following any rules. Oh dear, I just stuck down the wrong side of my piece of paper, so I'm just going to have to hope that it dries soon and it won't be too sticky. So you see, accidents so often happen in art, but we can always go back and fix them. And sometimes it gives us the opportunity to solve problems creatively, which is never a bad thing. When you're cutting out your shapes, remember that you can cut out a full shape, like a circle, out of your piece of paper, and that then would be a complete circle on the other side. Or you can cut out a half shape, which means that your shape will be made up of both black and white colors. I'm going to stick this big part down now, and I have to try again to match up all those little edges as carefully as I can. This is a bit of a complicated project, so I hope all you junior rangers are paying attention and having fun while you explore this new way of doing art. Remember, you can always simplify the project, make it a lot more easy to make if you focus on using bigger shapes than the smaller ones. But if you're ready for a challenge, think about what you'd like to do in your artwork. Again, we're matching up the corners as carefully as possible, and I've got that tiny circle, half circle in my hand. I was so scared I'd lose it. So I'm going to stick it down now. So I'm going to remember to flick the circle over and put glue on the side that is opposite to the white side. Now that's the first part done. Now I'm going to think about how I want to do my toe prints for this footprint. I'll definitely use my pencil for this part, and I must remember to keep a bit of a gap between the shapes that I've already cut out and the toe prints that will come next. I was getting a bit close to that line, so just be careful when you draw yours. And I'm also going to cut out a claw print for my footprint. Next, I'm going to draw the second toe print with another claw. You can have a bit of fun with this. I'd love to hear what animals made your footprints in your artworks. You can be as imaginative as you like. This next part is a little tricky, so you might have to listen very closely. When you're cutting out the toe prints, try not to cut out with a very jagged line, and try your best to only have one cut that goes from the outside towards your toe print. We'll have to stick these down very carefully so that you can't see that cut later. So it is very important to do this step slowly and carefully. So cut carefully around your shape, trying to make smooth lines, remembering that if you move your paper around instead of the hand holding your scissors, you can get a really nice smooth flow to your cutting. It just gives you a little bit more control. When you're getting your materials together, it might be a good idea to think about the size of the scissors that you're going to use. If you've got very small hands, try to find a small pair of scissors. I've got quite large hands and I'm using a big pair of scissors, but this won't be the case for all of you. When I'm ready to stick down, I use my large piece of paper and place it exactly where it should be. And now I'm going to see where exactly my toe print will be reflected on the white side of the paper. So I'm going to have to flip that round and glue it on the other side. So now I'm going to try and kind of guess exactly where it goes. Again, this is not going to be perfect, but just try your best to get it in round about the same spot as the opposite side. I'm going to glue it down by holding it down with one finger and then giving it a rub with my thumb. This will just make sure that the toe print doesn't move around as I'm trying to glue it down. Alright, what I'm going to do is cut out my two claw prints and the other toe print, stick them down, and I will catch up with you in a couple of minutes. So something to remember when you're gluing down your pieces of paper, especially because I made a mistake and glued one of my pieces down the wrong way earlier, is to glue the pencil side down. So whatever side has your pencil drawing on it, that's the side that should get the glue on it, and that's the side that you should stick down onto your white piece of paper. Maybe that'll help us to remember what to do when things might get a little bit confusing. So you can see my footprint's starting to take shape. So at this point you can definitely stop with your artwork, or you can think carefully about what other shapes you'd like to include around your footprint. So remember, you can make this quite simple, or you can make it a little bit more challenging and complicated if you feel you'd like to. So if you do want to extend your project a little bit further, you could always cut out geometric patterns or shapes, or you could include some more footprints, like the example I showed you earlier. I'm going to cut the entire footprint out of the one side in the black, which will then reflect on the other side of the artwork. I'm going to look in the book and see what else might inspire me to make the footprint. Be careful about cutting out very small bits of paper to resemble the toes, like this vervet monkey, because those pieces go missing very easily and are very difficult to stick down. The insect ones look interesting, but I think I'd lose those little pieces before I manage to stick them onto my artwork. So I think I'll look for something bigger. Maybe we can try a zebra footprint. They look quite interesting, and I like the round shape with the triangular piece in the middle. So let's give it a try. I think I'll do the zebra hoof print a little smaller than it would really be in nature, just so that I can fit it onto the format of my artwork. Again, I'm getting a little bit close to that side line of my black piece of paper, so remember to try and move it a little bit away from there again. So I'm going to draw this triangular shape that goes inside the rounded hoof shape. But again, I'm getting a little bit close to this line. You can always at this point erase your pencil and make a new line that you can cut out a bit further away. After I've cut out the rounded hoof part and the triangular shape, I can then decide if I want to add any more shapes to that zebra hoof cutout. So let's see what this looks like, Junior Rangers. You might remember I said this artwork was inspired by Japanese Notan artworks, which deal a lot with negative and positive space. Negative space in artworks is usually the space around the thing that's been drawn or painted. So in this case, it's a bit of a play on that, because what we cut out becomes the positive space on the white side of the page, while the spaces left on the black become the negative space. So remember, each time we do this, we want to kind of mirror what's happening on that black side across into the white side. So where we put our shapes down is quite important. If you'd like to change it up, you can do that. It depends what you want for your artwork. But if you want to break the rules, that's absolutely fine. But Japanese Notan artworks are typically symmetrical. Stick the pencil side down and try not to get your fingers too sticky. If your fingers do get sticky along the way, maybe it's a good idea to go and wash your hands, because you don't want glue getting stuck all over your page and making it dirty. There we go. Now I'm going to make as small a cut as I can across towards my triangular shape and cut that shape out very carefully using smooth cutting lines. So Junior Rangers, are you all coming up with a few ideas of what your artwork is going to look like? I can't wait to see what you come up with. I think everyone comes up with quite unique ideas, especially with projects like these, and I can't wait to see what yours might be. Okay, so now these are stuck down. They almost look a little bit like two little eyes. Looks a bit funny. Okay, so now you can decide if you want to add anything more, if you want to add more footprints around the sides or some geometric shapes around the top, but it's also up to you whether you want to leave it as it is for now. I'm thinking I might add some geometric patterns, possibly just a diamond above my lion's paw to finish off my artwork. I made another little mistake here. I cut out the larger shape before I did the smaller shape first. If I'd done the smaller shape, it would have been a lot easier to stick down and I wouldn't have had so many moving parts. So just a little art hack in case you want to do the same in your artworks. Just a good reminder that nothing ever works out perfectly, and you kind of have to roll with the flow of your artwork and see what it teaches you in doing so. And hopefully I haven't lost that little bit that I must stick down in the middle. You can see that this one's a bit of a tricky maneuver, trying to get it to touch the sides of the shape on the opposite side. So you might have to wiggle it around a little bit, but just keep trying your best. If it's not perfect, that's absolutely fine. Alright, so I had a look at the small diamond and I figured out exactly how it was cut out, and then I flicked it over carefully, put the glue on the side that I wanted to stick down, and I will stick it down. Yeah, so now you can see the artwork's taken quite a bit of shape. If you'd like to include any other forms or patterns or things around the outside, you absolutely can. I think I'll stop there for this one though. For the previous demonstration of this project that I did, I cut out some stripes which I stuck on either side of the page alternating, just to give it a little bit more something different. I'm going to show you the final step now so that you can go and create your own Artworks Junior Ranges and you know exactly how you'll do it. Okay, so once you've finalized all your shapes and cut out all the pieces that you want to, it's time to do the last final bit of sticking. So as you can see, I'm going to turn it over now and put the glue on the back of the piece of paper. It might be a good idea to find a scrap piece of paper or some newspaper to do this on, as the glue tends to go everywhere. You definitely don't want to put glue on your actual artwork. My black paper is slightly longer than the white A4 paper, so I think I'm going to just chop it off now before I do the glue and make a mess. So I'll use a pencil. You could use a ruler. I'm not going to. I'm just going to make little pencil lines and chop the paper off where it needs to be chopped. Remember, it's okay if your artwork has edges that aren't specifically matched up. It's more important that the inside patterns and forms are well matched. You might even want to include some geometric shapes around the outside of your artwork paper, and these you could stick on the white side in turn. When you're cutting, just make sure that you are not cutting out any bits of paper that have flopped behind your artwork. You wouldn't want to cut those off now. So just remember, anything that you cut out, remember to save the papers for later in case you'd like to include them in your artwork. Okay, now that's the side that I want to stick down, so I must remember to turn it over to apply the glue on the correct side of the paper. An important thing to do when you're gluing is to make sure that you're gluing around the outside of the shapes. Get all those little edge bits. This way, the shape or paper will stick down beautifully and there won't be any flappy bits on the sides. It might be a little bit tricky when doing the small bits that were cut out, but do it slowly and carefully because we want to try and get those stuck as close together as we can when we put it onto the proper artwork. Alright, I think that's enough glue, so we can try and stick this down onto our artwork now. Okay, so I'm going to carefully peel that back. You may want to even ask somebody to help you hold the sides of your paper while you try and place the small bits that go directly next to your footprint itself. This part can be a little bit tricky, so some extra hands are always useful. I'm going to turn my page around to a landscape format so that I've got a bit more space to work with. I'm going to very carefully place my paper down slowly, trying to match up all of those shapes as I go. You might have to maneuver the paper a bit and wiggle it into place. As I said, this isn't easy, so take your time and don't worry if it's not exactly perfect. If you get any bubbles in the paper that you're sticking down, maybe you can use the tip of your finger to rub those out so that they don't stay on your artwork permanently. You can probably see that I'm trying to match up all those little cut edges that I made earlier when I was trying to cut out my toes. But if those pieces don't match up exactly, you can always use a black pen to just go over those little gaps to hide them from anyone looking at your artwork later. Just remember, you can always carefully peel back your paper if you have got it in the wrong spot, but you can see it's not an easy process. So give yourself time to figure it out. And remember, this might be the first time that you're doing an art project like this, Junior Ranges. So take your time and learn through the creative process too. Try not to tear it. I made a small tear in mine, but how I disguised it was I just stuck the paper very close together, like the areas that were cut earlier, and you don't even see it in the end. If you work with a smaller piece of paper than an A4, it might be much easier to stick this part down. So it's up to you. You decide what kind of paper size you'd like to work with. And there we go. So I'm going to give it a rub just to get rid of any air bubbles. And there you go. I'm just going to give my artwork a bit of a rub to get rid of any air bubbles that may have formed. Remember, no artworks are exactly perfect, and I might take a black pen and fill in those little cracks just to hide them further. And use an eraser perhaps to get rid of any pencil outlines that I may not have cut out exactly. If I wanted to, I could take those small bits of triangle that I cut out from the bottom of the black side and stick them on the other side, but I think that my artwork is pretty much complete. Alright, Junior Rangers, we can't wait to see what you create this week, so please send through your artworks once you've finished of your Japanese Notan inspired animal tracks and footprints projects. We can't wait to see what you upload.